People who know that we put a title of a sermon will be wondering what kind of sermon title Church Motto 2018 is. But people who have been here many years will know that it's our tradition in the church to pray about a text that we believe is a text we want to share with our thousands of people on our mailing list and the people who visit the website. The motto this year, as you've probably seen it, and if not, grab some as you leave, there are plenty. Jesus said, "In the world you will have trouble, but take courage, I have overcome the world." It's our motto for this year, and we thought and prayed over it like every other year. Particularly because it's not the usual type of motto. Some people have contacted me and said, one of my good friends, I won't name them here, but they're a Methodist minister, so you can expect anything. One of them contacted me and said, "Thank you for your motto. I've now decided whether it's an overdose or slitting my wrists." But more than that, he was joking, by the way, but more than that have been the people who have written back specifically and said something like, "This is the word in season for my view of myself and my understanding of the world at this point." I think we've watched more telly than we probably normally do over Christmas. I've been blown away by some of the adverts. Some of the adverts are better than the TV programs, aren't they? But that one, I remember the first time I saw it, the one where the father and son are just sat on a settee watching television and just watching the news headlines from Syria. And the more the news headlines goes, the little boy just leans forward and looks at the screen, and the father just puts his arm around him. It sums up for many of us an attitude to a new year. The fragility of so many important things. The continuing awareness of the awfulness of life for so many human beings. The apparent increase in our awareness of a nuclear threat. The challenging longer-term prospects for our children and our grandchildren. The seeming volatility, that's a polite word given this week, the seeming volatility of world leaders who hold enormous power. And the fragility of multiple world contexts. So it doesn't surprise me that a word in season for some people is to hear Jesus say, "In the world you will have trouble, but take courage. I have overcome the world." And we notice the context in which Jesus says this, that he has been with his disciples, that he is going to leave his disciples, and they're going to think that all things are lost. But in the end of the day, just when everything seems finished and he's laid in the ground, God will perform a miracle that turns round the world. And he says to them, "Keep heart, keep courage. I've overcome the world." I want to give a word of testimony. I do that from time to time. If some of you have heard something like this before or a part of it, I make no apologies. Testimonies are given to be repeated. But when I arrived home in 2001 from the Methodist conference, I have to say that the Methodist conference didn't always have this effect upon me, but when I arrived home from the conference in 2001, within 6 hours I was in hospital, where I stayed for 6 days. It was a long week diagnosing a set of diffuse problems that in the end diagnosed that I had a genetic blood condition, which I, of course, being genetic, I live with to this day and is carefully managed and is usually the least of my worries. But I didn't know that then. Then all I knew was that the following day I was to have a liver biopsy and a kidney biopsy. Then I'd been in hospital 2 days and probably slept about 4 hours in an open ward that resembled Beirut. Some of you will know that kind of feeling. And I was feeling very fragile. Had I a future? Is my ministry over? 2001, it's a long time ago. Helen had come to visit me in the evening visiting hours. And at just turned 8 o'clock, the nurses giving you a few minutes grace, kicked everybody out. And I was a little bit weepy, and Helen said, look, you need some sleep. Say your prayers, turn over, and even though it's only turned 8 o'clock, try and get some sleep for tomorrow. And as I turned over on the bed, and we'll put the slide up here, as I turned over on the bed, I looked at the wall where there had been, in this ward, certainly all the time I was there, but looking at it probably for the last 40 years, there was a clock. It was something like this clock. It was all in one piece rather than 2 blocks. But the clock had the time, hours and minutes at the top, and that worked. And then underneath there was the day and the month that it was supposed to tell, and that didn't work because it was July. And I'd looked at this clock a number of times, and in my belligerentness in hospital, you know, few people are at their best in hospital, I'd looked at it and said, they can't even get a clock that works. And then as I lay sideways, looking at this clock sideways, it suddenly hit me. The hour, the minute, the day, and the month. And I immediately thought of a very early Methodist who on the 24th day of the 5th month, about 9:15, went to a house in Aldersgate Street, London, and had a heart-warming experience. Now, I've preached about this before, and I'm telling you that it is a conversion of sorts, but it certainly wasn't John Wesley's first conversion. Wesley himself tells you the import of the Aldersgate Day experience. He says, and an assurance was given me. So there I was, lying in bed, wondering what the future held, and just suddenly became aware in that hospital bed that God held me. The lesson, God's faithfulness, God's saving power, God's careful keeping can be relied upon. Our God is a faithful covenant-keeping God. The assurance is not that everything will always be all right. The voice didn't say to me in the hospital ward, oh, and by the way, the biopsies tomorrow will all be clear. The voice said, I'm holding you. It's not that no suffering will ever come, not that the pain will never pierce your heart, not that you'll never taste physical death. I can guarantee that for us all. The assurance was not that all the tests will be clear. It was, I will walk through the valley with you, and my rod and my staff will be your strength. It was, in the words of the covenant service, you are mine, and I am yours. It was an assurance given me dramatically on that occasion and never as dramatically since. But it's offered to us all because in those acute moments you catch a glimpse with crystal clarity of how God is actually all the time. And even when we don't feel it, and even when we're not in a time of such extremis, The miracle of the clock and any other kind of confirming sign is nowhere to be seen. The promise remains true. Jesus said, "In the world you will have trouble. But take courage, I have overcome the world." And for those of us for whom this is a word in season at the beginning of 2018, receive the promise. God is faithful. But some of us are actually really looking forward to this year. It's filled with promise. Perhaps we're expecting a baby. Perhaps we're hoping for a baby. Perhaps it's a promotion at work. Perhaps it's a change of life for the better. Perhaps you put something in train 3 years ago and in 2018 this thing is going to happen. We plan to marry. It's a special year of celebration. You look in the diary and already there's certain things there for whenever. And you sort of think, I'm really looking forward to that. John Wesley periodically gave what he called directions for the covenant. Don't know whether you knew that. He did it about 4 times throughout his life. He did it first of all in the 1850s, and the last time he did it was in 1780. Which was quite late in his life. He was in his 70s by 1780. And in the 1780 directions to the covenant, where effectively he says to Methodists, here are the thoughts and prayers that should fill your devotions as you approach saying the covenant prayer, as you approach the Lord's table in this special occasion.